Hello everyone, Just Podcast TV is here. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notified on new contents.
Episode 16, Rich Reward. For a moment, the foot of the mountain of the peak bound was as quiet as a grave. None of the servant disciples, including the three heroes, dared to breathe loudly. They just quietly watched the white-clothed man walk toward them step by step. The white-robed man's steps weren't large, but he wasn't moving slowly. In the blink of an eye, he had already arrived above the group of servant disciples. Oh, there are quite a number of good seedlings. There's a possibility of condensation of spirit bones. The white-clothed, middle-aged man looked down at them from above. In an instant, everyone on the scene felt as if their bodies were being shot through by a mysterious force. It was clear at a glance. Amadeus's heart froze. Though he hurriedly calmed himself down, he was deeply afraid that this white-cloth man would discover his secret. The heaven and earth devouring method was a heaven-defying technique. Once it was revealed, there would be no place for him to hide anymore. My name is Delphi. I am now a master of the knighthood of the order. I will be in charge of your assessment. This man is only a master of knighthood? Of the order? Then what kind of strength do the sect elder and the sect chief have? Amadeus's heart shook once more. Being a master of the knighthood of the order sounded noble. But in fact, he was in the huge Mithraea warrior sect, a mid-level character. Above him was the master of the Nine Master, a core elder, the sect chief. It seems like I have underestimated the Mithraea warrior sect. That's right. The Mithraea warrior sect is one of the top powers in the Roman Empire. How can it dominate Ravenna, Milan, and Naples otherwise? A gladiator who has mastered the bone-forging stage was just an ordinary master of the knighthood of the order, Amadeus thought. I was just a puny pulse opening stage 6th layered gladiator. What was there to be proud of? Amadeus's heart sank in doubt. The Mithraea warrior sect was only one of the 9 major powers in the Roman Empire. It wasn't even ranked very high among them. Right now, I am indeed no match for the Master Delphi. But sooner or later, I will surpass him. I might even surpass everyone from the Mithraea warrior sect. I believe that day will not be too far in the future. Suddenly, Amadeus's eyes shone with a brilliant light. He was destined to transcend the world and be the top-ranking gladiator. I have to say, you little fellows are very lucky. The reward for this batch of breakthrough competitions, it's said to be the richest in 10 years. As soon as Master Delphi finished speaking, there is slight commotion. The rewards were not as cheap as they thought, especially those given to the top 10 warriors. Even disciples in the knighthood of the order would go crazy for them. All competitors that succeed in the games will obtain 100 gold denarii. 100 gold denarii were equivalent to 1,000 silver denarii. Almost enough for a family of 3 to live comfortably for 10 and a half days. 1,000 denarii of silver was enough to compare to the wealth of the richest men in many remote towns. Each person in the top of 100 will receive 100 denarii of gold and an upper-class spirit invigorating pill. Wow! That is way too generous. Many servant disciples sucked in a breath of cold air. The invigoration pills were divided into 4 grades: extreme, high, middle, and low. Even the lowest grade of low-grade spirit pills were no less than 100 denarii of silver. As for upper-class spirit invigorating pills, they could barely be called a middle-grade spirit pill. One upper-class spirit invigorating pill was worth 1,000 denarii of silver, and it was the price of a middle-grade spirit pill in the sect. In the outside world, it would be sold for 1,500 denarii of silver. Even 2,000 denarii of silver was not impossible. In that instant, countless servant disciples' eyes lit up. If they had this upper-class spirit invigorating pill, they would be able to save a few months of bitter training. They would be able to break through to their current training base in one go. The top 30 are 500 gold denarii each, and a top-grade spirit invigorating pill. At this moment, besides the 3 heroes, Amadeus, and a few other people, all the servant disciples started breathing rapidly, and their faces were flush red. A supreme-grade spirit invigorating pill was one of the top-grade middle-grade spirit pills, and the medicinal strength contained within it was several times that of an upper-class spirit invigorating pill. As long as it was a single soul invigorating pill, they would be able to withstand half a year of hard work from a 7th layer gladiator. And for the top 10, they will be awarded 1 spirit stone and 1 pulse-breaking pill. Wow! Amadeus took a deep breath. One after the other, the prizes kept coming. The spirit stone was a common currency used by gladiators who knew how to forge bone. 1 spirit stone was worth 1,000 gold denarii, and it was usually priceless. The pulse-breaking pill was also extremely expensive. It was ranked among the upper-class elixirs. 1 such pill was worth 1 year of hard work for a 9th layer trainee. With this pill, it was possible for them to raise their training base to the 1st layer. As for the top 3, Master Delphi's voice paused for a moment. Then he looked down at the servant disciples with interest. What is the reward for the top 3? What a rush! Countless service disciples scratched their ears, they scratched their cheeks, and they were looking anxious. If the top 10 awards had already been so great, then how generous would the rewards be for the top 3? 1 spirit stone, 1 pulse-breaking pill, 1 purple elixir. At this moment, even the 3 heroes were unable to maintain their composure. The purple elixirs were also upper-class elixirs. The value of these elixirs was not much different from some supreme-grade spirit pills. It was a rare, life-saving medicine that could recover all of the 9th layer gladiator's spiritual energy. Apart from that, in the time it took for an incense stick to burn, his strength, speed, and endurance would be doubled. It was definitely the best choice for a desperate counterattack. And this wasn't an exaggeration to say that, with a purple elixir, one almost had an extra life. No matter what, Amadeus had to make it to the top 3 and seize the purple elixir. At that moment, Master Delphi was floating in the air once again, and he threw down a heavy bomb. The reward for the first place winner is something that even I am envious of. What? Even Master Delphi is envious of it? Isn't this a little too exaggerated? Countless disciples' servants were horrified. Master Delphi was a bone-foraging master who had condensed a spiritual bloodline. And they were post-opening stage minor gladiators. Needless to say, for someone like Master Delphi, his annual income must have surpassed that of 100 masters of the knighthoods of the order. Other than the top 3 rewards, the first place holder will also receive a marrow cleansing pill. What? Marrow cleansing pill? Isn't that reward too generous? In an instant, all the servant disciples turned red in the face, and their breathing quickened. Even the master, who was standing not far away from them, had a parched mouth, and his eyes were filled with fire. They wished they could have been a dozen or 20 years younger. Transform into servant disciples and participate in this competition. The marrow cleansing pill was a true supreme grade spirit pill, and it was considered one of the top among the numerous supreme grade spirit pills. It had the ability to cleanse the marrow and cleanse the spirit. It also had the effect of increasing one's bloodline, especially to those quasi-8th grade bloodline practitioners. It was even more important. This would allow their bloodline to truly transform into a rank 8 and push them into the ranks of top geniuses. From now on, they would soar into the sky, and their future would be boundless. The first place belongs to me. The 4 top geniuses of the 3 heroes and 1 immortal were burning with a fighting spirit. And they were each determined to take first place. Although the marrow cleansing pill wasn't enough to help their bloodline advance to the 7th grade, it was still possible for their bloodline to reach the mid-rank 8. Those with a low rank 8 bloodline could be considered a top genius amongst the servant disciples. However, in the knighthood of the order, they could only be considered ordinary geniuses. Whether or not they could make it into the top 10 was an unknown. However, a mid-rank 8 bloodline was different. In the knighthood of the order, there were no more than 5 people who could suppress him. This marrow cleansing pill, I'm determined to get it. Amadeus's eyes sparkled, and his expression was firm. After 10 days of bitter training, his bloodline had improved by leaps and bounds. He was only 1 step away from the mid-8 rank. With this marrow cleansing pill, he had full confidence in raising his bloodline to the mid-rank 8. Right at that moment, the corner of Master Delphi's mouth suddenly curved up, and his white robe fluttered in the air. He smiled mysteriously. The rewards for this batch of breakthrough competitions are indeed the most generous in the past 10 years. But... Episode 17. The challenge begins. But... the next group of peak-bound warriors had a faintly ominous feeling in their hearts. Master Delphi, who was standing in the air, opened his mouth and spoke slowly. Everyone should understand one thing. The more you gain, the more benefits you will get. Usually the greater the reward, the more rewards you will get over time. Yes, the reward for this batch of breakthrough competitions is the most generous 1 in 10 years. You have to pass through 500 meters of the Bronze Warrior's Lane to win the competition. Master Delphi's words were heard by all the servant disciples. It was like a sudden clap of thunder, shocking everyone to the point of being dumbfounded. It was as if bone-piercing icing water had poured down, annihilating the burning hearts of all the servant disciples. The entire Bronze Warrior's Lane was 800 meters long, and there was a small checkpoint every 10 meters. Every 240 meters was also another big checkpoint. In an instant, apart from a few who were still able to maintain their calm, most of the servant disciples filled with anxiety. Amadeus turned to find Rufus's face pale. His eyes were lifeless. In the hearts of the comrades, there seemed to be only despair. Why? Why was it so easy last time? Master Delphi only had needed a little more than 330 meters to break through to the knighthood of the order. Why had it become so difficult for them when it was their turn? It was not fair. They kept roaring in their hearts, but none of them would dare to make a sound. The high and mighty master of the knighthood of the order wouldn't care about the opinion of a servant disciple. Now, all of you follow me up into the mountain. As if he did not see the sudden change in expression of the servant disciples, Adolphus Decimus turned around and stepped directly into the sky. Although the 500 meters of Bronze Warrior's Lane were difficult, it was only relative to the ordinary disciples. How could he care about the dissatisfaction of these mediocre people? The Bronze Warrior's Lane was halfway up to the mountain of the peak bound. It was a large cave that was several meters wide and nearly 2 meters tall. From afar, the cave was dark, and it was unknown where it led to. At this moment, several disciples of the knighthood of the order were standing in front of the dark mountain. Among them, there were several people sitting in front of the square table. On the square table, there were many pieces of paper for registration. As Master Delphi and the group servant of disciples arrived, a disciple of the order immediately took a step forward and pressed on a protruding rock in the cave. In the blink of an eye, the dark cave became bright. The cave was very deep, nearly 300 meters deep. At a glance, it looked somewhat empty. The breakthrough competition is about to begin. I wonder who will be the winner of this year's first meeting. If I am not mistaken, the winner will be one of the 3 heroes. As for which one, it's hard to say. Everyone, don't underestimate Julia Albus. She's no less talented than the three heroes. It's said that she broke through to the 6th layer 3 months ago. The competition was about to begin. The master of the Servicemen's Peak started quietly discussing who would be the final winner of today's competition. Candida, don't forget about our bet. Barbo walked out of the crowd, to Candida's side in a few steps. The corner of his mouth curled up, and a trace of pride appeared on his face. If Amadeus is lucky enough to succeed, Barbo, don't feel sorry for those 10 spirit stones. Paulinus Barbo looked as if victory was within his grasp, as if the 10 spirit stones were already in his bag. Barbo, don't be too full on yourself. Perhaps the one who will lose on your end will be you. Aurelius Candida sneered, but he did not have much confidence in his words. Nero Felix, one of the 3 heroes, was like a huge mountain, pressing down on him until he could not breathe. Candida, let's wait and see. Before we begin, I'll have someone demonstrate it. You guys have to watch carefully. As he spoke, Master Delphi nodded at a disciple of the order beside him. Yes, Master. The disciple responded and strode into the cave. As soon as the disciple stepped into the cave, the walls on both sides suddenly cracked open, and a pair of bronze men the size of humans rushed out. The sound of breaking walls could be heard continuously. One pair of bronze men after another jumped out and onto the ledge. The first pair of bronze men that appeared waved 2 huge copper hammers toward the disciple. Strong wind howled with each wave of the instruments. The hammers were so strong that it was impossible for anyone but a gladiator to face them. The disciple who were chosen by Master Delphi was naturally not a weakling. Even among the numerous disciples of the order, he was considered an expert. With just 2 punches, he was able to blast away that pair of bronze men. In less than a breath's time, he had already exceeded 10 meters. The bronze men's strength had suddenly increased. After 20 meters, the bronze men's strength had increased once again. But it was still useless. One bronze man after another was easily sent flying by the disciple. None of them could get close to him. In less than 10 seconds, he had already run 240 meters and had reached the first major obstacle in the Bronze Warrior's lane. Though he fought them off, the bronze men at each checkpoint proved increasingly difficult, both men of their increasing might, and because of the competitors' waning strength. Even so, the bronze men were far inferior to a true 7th layer warrior. Under the encirclement of dozens of bronze men, although the disciple had forced his way through in the end, he was like a fish out of water. He was indescribably tired. Obviously, he had reached his limit. How terrifying. Can we really make it through? Many of the servant disciples' faces had turned incomparably pale, and their eyes were filled with hesitation and confusion. In the first 400 meters, They still had confidence that they could fight it out. However, the last 100 meters, especially the last 20 meters, they really did not have much confidence. Each bronze man was comparable to a 5th Empyrean early-stage gladiator who possessed a 9-rank high-grade bloodline. They didn't know how to use the combat skill, but the terrifying amount was enough to make up for all of this. Right at that moment, the disciple who was standing beside the cave pressed a mechanism, and all the bronze men immediately retreated. The cracked walls also returned to their original state, as if it had never been damaged. Now, I declare that the examination has officially begun. When the disciple returned to the cave, Master Delphi announced loudly, "You are the first." He pointed at one of the servant disciples. He is a gray-clothed youth. He gulped and jumped in the air. He was so fast that it looks like he is flying. In less than 10 breaths' time, he had already crossed 100 meters. After advancing 240 meters, he arrived at the first checkpoint of the Bronze Warriors' Lane arrived. The bronze men's strength suddenly increased by several times, and the young man in the gray speed was obviously reduced. After advancing 360 meters, each bronze man possessed the strength of a 4th-layer warrior. At this moment, the gray-clothed youth was struggling with every step he took. There were simply too many bronze men, and they had completely surrounded him. Their copper hammers continuously struck his body. Even though his body was like fine iron, under the continuous impact, he still spat out a mouthful of blood. In the end, the gray-clothed youth fell to the ground about 380 meters away. A disciple of the Order, who was outside the Bronze Warriors' Lane, slammed his palm against the wall. All the bronze men immediately stopped circulating and retreated back into the wall. 386 meters eliminated. A disciple quickly jumped to his side and glanced at him with disdain. He picked up the gray-cloth youth and threw him out of the cave like he was picking up trash. He is really pathetic. Seeing that there was not a single part of the gray-clothed youth's body still intact, the group of the servant disciples all sucked in a breath of cold air. Many of them even wanted to retreat. The young man in gray was not a weakling. He was a 4th-layer mid-stage. Among these 2,000 servant disciples, he had barely made it into the top 1,500. Even he had only made it past 836. So how far could the others go? Fortunately, his injuries were all superficial wounds. With his physique, after recuperating for a few days, he would be fully healed. Many of the servant disciples secretly heaved a sigh of relief. If they failed the breakthrough competition, they might pay a price of being crippled or even losing their lives. Many of them would have to reconsider whether they should continue or not. Next, you, very quickly, a delicate and pretty black-clothed youth trembling entered the Bronze Warriors' Lane. Compared to the gray-clothed young man from before, this second person was clearly a little weaker. After After stumbling for 360 meters in the Bronze Warrior's lane, he was knocked down to the ground by a fierce bronze man hammer. You. Master Delphi pointed with its big hand, and a sturdy youth immediately entered the Bronze Warrior's lane with a solemn expression. His training base had reached the late 4th layer, and he had the bloodline of a rank 9 high grade. He was several times stronger than the man in gray. If this was the last competition, he would most definitely be able to pass it with ease. However, the difficulty of this competition had increased exponentially. He barely managed to pass 450 meters before he was fiercely smashed to the ground by a bronze man. He also failed. This is too difficult. Is it really possible for us to pass the test and successfully break through to the knighthood of the order? I think we should just give up. The atmosphere became heavy all of a sudden. Many of the servant disciples were preparing to give up. The burly youth was not a weakling. Within the group of servant disciples, he could be considered above average. And even he stopped 450 meters away. The result would probably be the same for anyone else. In the last 20 meters, the bronze men's power increased by 5 times. It was extremely difficult. Episode 18. Comparison to Amadeus. Perhaps having seen through the thoughts of his servants, Master Delphi picked an expert this time. A handsome young master dressed in brocaded clothes with distinct facial features, sword-shaped eyebrows, and starry eyes. His expression faintly revealed a trace of arrogance. Adrianus Barbo was a 5th grade mid-stage warrior, and with the help of the powerful quasi-8th grade bloodline, he was quite powerful among the 1,000 servant disciples on the battlefield. Adrianus Barbo took a step forward and entered the Bronze Warrior's lane. The walls on the left and right cracked open with a loud bang, and numerous bronze men holding the copper hammers broke out of the walls. Break. An incomparably violent force surged out, and with just a single punch, he swept all 4 bronze men onto the ground. As a second-tier genius, who was only second to the 3 heroes and 1 immortal, Adrianus Barbo was far stronger than the other disciples. In less than half the time, he had already slaughtered his way 480 meters into the Bronze Warrior's lane. In an instant, the strength of the bronze men increased by more than 1 level. But it still couldn't stop Adrianus Barbo's progress. In less than 10 breaths of time, Adrianus Barbo had already passed the last 20 meters of the course, which had caused countless servant disciples to despair. He had obtained the spot to advance. They are too weak. Adrianus Barbo laughed wildly and continued to push forward. Very quickly, he had passed 500 meters. At this moment, the strength of the bronze men was no less than that of a 5th grade mid-stage gladiator. They were like paper in front of Adrianus Barbo. Not a single bronze man was a match for him. Outside the Bronze Warrior's lane, All the servant disciples were dumbfounded by what they had saw. 600 meters? He's really too strong. He's still pushing forward. These bronze men are no match for him. 616 meters. Is this really the power that servant disciples should have? Many disciples of the order can only walk this far. Candida, how is my disciple? In an open space hundreds of meters away from Bronze Warrior's Lane, Paulinus Barbo gently touched his nose and smiled proudly at Aurelius Candida. He's not bad, Aurelius Candida said begrudgingly. 616 meters was not a low score. In the previous year, he could have almost made it to the top 10. It was much better than the last time he came. In the past, he had only managed to pass 500 meters in Bronze Warrior's Lane. Paulinus Barbo smiled non-committedly and said with some indifference, "Who is stronger, him or Amadeus?" Damn it! Barbo, don't underestimate him. Hearing this, Aurelius Candida frowned, and a trace of anger flashed across his eyes. Although Adrianus Barbo was powerful on the southern peak, he could barely make it into the top 5. He wasn't even qualified to make it to the top 3. Compared to Nero Felix, Adrianus Barbo was much weaker. But now he was comparing Adrianus Barbo to Amadeus. This meant that Amadeus and Nero Felix were not on the same level. Barbo, although this is not bad, he is still far from being able to compete with Amadeus. Aurelius Candida laughed coldly. Looks like you think very highly of Amadeus. Paulinus Barbo was not angry. He laughed lightly and suddenly changed the topic. If that's the case, how about we increase the stakes? What? Increase the stakes? Aurelius Candida's expression changed lightly. He opened his mouth and was about to refuse. Although Amadeus was strong, there was still a big gap between him and the 3 heroes. However, right at that moment, Barbo seemed to have sensed Candida's thoughts. He smiled mysteriously and said, "Candida, I was lucky enough to obtain a spirit accumulation pill." "What? You have a spirit accumulation pill?" Candida's voice suddenly became louder, and even his breathing became hurried. Like the marrow cleansing pill, it had the ability to nurture souls and to nurture one's sense of security and well-being. During his trip to the ancient cave 5 years ago, Aurelius had borrowed the power of a secret technique. He had paid a painful price for it, which had left him with a serious internal injury. The spirit accumulation pill was just what Aurelius had been looking for to cure himself. "What do you want to bet?" Candida's voice trembled slightly. No matter what, he couldn't give up on his spirit accumulation pill. His martial abilities had been stalled for 3 years, and now he can only give up. Because his soul was damaged, he was unable to break through for a long time. When he had heard this, a pleased expression appeared on Barbo's face. However, he simply smiled and said, "Candida, do as you wish, as long as the value of the item you give is about the same as the spirit accumulation pill." Candida thought for a moment and said, How about 5 spirit stones? Barbo shook his head, and a trace of playfulness appeared on his face as he said, Candida, in your eyes, these high-grade spirit pills are only worth 5 spirit stones? Damn it. A wisp of ruthlessness flashed past Candida's eyes. But in the end, he still forcefully suppressed the rage in his heart. He gritted his teeth and said, Barbo, how about this? I'll add another spirit stone. 6 spirit stones. What a large sum of money. Paulinus winked at Aurelius. Looks like Candida still doesn't have any sincerity. Barbo, don't go too far. Candida gritted his teeth. As one of the top sects in the Roman Empire, the Mithraea warrior sect naturally didn't lack top-grade elixirs. It wasn't like they didn't have even higher-grade treasure pills. 6 spirit stones was already far beyond the true value of spirit accumulation pills. Unfortunately, these high-grade medicinal pills could not be bought with money. One needed a certain amount of status to be able to buy them. Candida, if you are unwilling, you can choose not to bet. Barbo casually waved his hand. He was very aware of Candida's desire for spirit accumulation pills. At this moment, he had completely taken initiative. Do you really think you can read my heart? Candida was burning with anger. The veins on his forehead were popping out. Suddenly, Barbo seemed to have remembered something. He patted his head. I almost forgot. I heard that Master Claudius of the Western Peak injured his fighting spirit a month ago. I think he won't be stingy with a few spirit stones. Candida glared at Barbo. Tell me, what else do you want? His voice was filled with unwillingness and helplessness. He had been stuck in the 7th Empyrean stage for too long, and he really didn't want to wait any longer. How about this? I'll bet on your sword. Barbo said it lightly, but the challenge almost made Candida jump to his feet. This was too much. The blue cloud sword was his personal weapon. Without the blue cloud sword, his strength would definitely drop by 3 levels. And though it was a high-grade spirit artifact, its value was absolutely not beneath a top-grade elixir like the spirit accumulation pill. Candida, if you can't bear to part with it, then forget it. Barbo dragged out the words for a maximum effect. Alright, Paulinus Barbo, you win. After a moment of silence, Candida finally chose to compromise. The spirit accumulation pill was too important to him. As long as there was a chance, he was not willing to give up. Barbo looked at Candida, feeling wronged. Candida, your words hurt me. If you don't want to, then forget it. Candida gritted his teeth with hatred. He really wanted to punch him. But in the end, he suppressed the anger in his heart and squeezed out a smile that was uglier than crying. He said, Barbo, I said the wrong thing. He was no longer young. He could feel that the blessings of Mithraea and his blood were showing signs of weakening. He could not afford to wait for another 3 years. I'll bet with you. said with a mock terrified face. But in his heart, he was laughing like a blooming flower. Damn it. Wait until I get well. Then I'll come and settle a score with you. While Aurelius and the other men were talking, a few more people entered the Bronze Warrior's lane. After that, all of them actually passed the test. Of course, these people's results couldn't be compared to Barbo's. The power of an example was boundless. As the servant disciples passed the test one by one and successfully advanced to the knighthood of the order, the servant disciples' depressed mood suddenly rose again. Everyone present was a famous figure in the servicemen's peak. They were the targets of countless servant disciples, and all of them were proud and arrogant people. No one thought that they were inferior to others. If others could do it, why couldn't they? I will definitely succeed in breaking through to the knighthood of the order. Each servant disciple clenched their fists tightly in determination. Their expressions were firm, and there was no longer confusion and melancholy in his eyes. Morale is excellent. Decimus narrowed his eyes and nodded. A gladiator must have the spirit of not admitting defeat. Otherwise, no matter how talented he was, it would be hard for him to achieve anything in the end. Next. Episode 19. Nero Felix's Fury. Yes, master. A handsome young man in white replied loudly. He took a step forward and strode toward the Bronze Warrior's lane. They can do it. I can do it too. The young man in white had a resolute expression on his face. As the strongest, savviest warrior from Greater Peak, Brutus Maya believed that he could never lose to a few people in front of him. In the next moment, one bronze man after another broke through the wall. They waved their huge bronze hammers and charged toward the young man in white. With a loud shout, Brutus's fist danced in the air, and creating a sky full of fist shadows, he sent the bronze men flying, one after another. Greater Peak was in the third grade serviceman's peak, along with Red Reed Peak. As the great senior brother of Greater Peak, Maya's training base was as strong as that of Marcus, who was once the number one person in Red Reed Peak. In fact, he was even slightly stronger. He was about to reach the 5th Empyrean. He sent one bronze man after another flying. In half a minute, he had already crossed the first checkpoint of Bronze Warrior's Lane. When faced with the bronze men, whose combat strength had increased by leaps and bounds, Brutus showed no signs of weakness. Greater Peak's unique combat skills were basic, but the 4-directional Tiger Shadow Fist was unleashed. A fierce aura burst out from his body. He was like a fierce tiger that had descended from the mountain, crazily lunging at those bronze men. Brutus was getting faster and faster. In the end, he had seemed to have turned into a ferocious tiger. 300 meters. 330 meters. 360 meters. 400 meters. About 450 meters, Brutus slowed down. The bronze men that were comparable to a peak fourth layer gladiator could already bring him a lot of trouble. After 480 meters, it was difficult for him to even take a step forward. After 490 meters, Brutus Maya let out an angry roar. He threw his head back and coughed up blood, then fell to the ground. What a pity. Amadeus's eyes flashed with sympathy when he saw Brutus being pulled out of the competition. He was out by the competition course by another disciple like a dead dog. He had only been 4 meters away from successfully breaking through to the knighthood of the order. Next, 426 meters, eliminated. 476 meters, eliminated. 526 meters, pass. 433 meters, eliminated. Time flowed like water, very quickly. Dusk gradually approached. Nearly 2,000 servant disciples were present. Most of the servant disciples had entered the bronze warrior's lane. From time to time, people would be dragged out by a disciple of the order like dead dogs. They would go to the side to recover. Although it was difficult to reach the 150-meter checkpoint from Bronze Warrior's Lane, under the high morale of the army, many servant disciples burst out of their comfort zone to give it a try. They even broke through their own limits. Their passing rate was almost 20%. Out of the 5 of them that successfully passed the test, and only 1 was advanced to the knighthood of the order. When he saw that another disciple servant had successfully passed the 500-meter mark in Bronze Warrior's Lane, the smile on Decimus's face became even wider. Initially, he thought that only 10% of the servant disciples would successfully complete the breakthrough competition. After all, compared to the past few years, this trip had become twice as difficult. Many disciples of the order would not be able to pass 500 meters of Bronze Warrior's Lane smoothly. During this period of time, out of the 6 great servant disciples in Red Reed Peak, all but Amadeus had entered the Bronze Warrior's Lane, one after another. Unfortunately, the result was not ideal. Except for Pollux, who had luckily passed the 500-meter mark. The other 4 were eliminated, including Rufus Drusus, who had been eliminated 400 meters away from the end of the Bronze Warrior's Lane. Next, you go. Master Delphi pointed with his big hand, and a servant disciple immediately entered the Bronze Warrior's Lane, full with confidence. The last 100+ remaining servants were all very strong. Each of them had a training base below the 5th Empyrean level, and many of them were even stronger than Barbo. 586 meters, pass. 592 meters, pass. 633 meters, pass. One servant disciple after another entered the Bronze Warrior's Lane. Apart from a few people who fell 500 meters away, the rest of them advanced smoothly. Soon, there were only 5 people left who had yet to participate in the exam. I wonder if you will give me a surprise, Master Delphi's gaze lingered on Nero and the others. The 5 people were the ones he valued the most. Candida, the good part is about to begin. Don't forget our bet. Paulina smiled lightly. Aurelius snorted but did not say anything. His eyes were fixed on Amadeus. Both of his fists were tightly clenched, and his palms were sweaty. Amadeus, it is up to you. Do not let me down. 6 spirit stones were almost all of his wealth, and that blue cloud sword was his personal spirit sword. He could not lose. Right at that moment, Master Delphi pointed at the pride of the southern peak. Nero Felix. Next, you go. Next is Nero Felix? How is it possible? An uproar broke out of outside of the Bronze Warriors' lane. They could all tell that Master Delphi wasn't just randomly pointing at the last 100 people. Instead, they were challenging the Bronze Warriors' lane according to their individual strength. Nero Felix, on the other hand, was one of the 3 heroes. No matter what, he should not be the first one to challenge the breakthrough competition. What? I'll be the first? Countless servant disciples were in disbelief. As the person involved, Nero's heart was filled with waves and shock. His handsome face took on a gloomy expression. Titus Julius and Tiberius Gabinus were behind him. Forget it. After all, both of them were top geniuses on par with him. There were also Julia Albus, whose presence he could not accept. After all, she was the only person here that he liked. But that Amadeus, he was just a piece of trash with a mere 9th class bloodline. How could he possibly surpass him? Shame. This was definitely the shame of his entire life. In the next moment, Felix's gaze shifted. He glanced at Amadeus indignantly. This matter won't end like this. Outside the Bronze Warriors' lane, in the open space where the Master of the Servicemen's Peak was located, Aurelius widened his eyes in disbelief. He thought, it was Nero who went first. Could it be that, in Master Delphi's heart, Amadeus is stronger than Nero? There is a very obvious difference between 8th grade bloodlines and 9th class bloodlines. But no one believes that Amadeus can seriously injure Marcus with a single punch. Perhaps he can really create another miracle. With this thought, Aurelius all of a sudden became excited deep in his heart. How could this be? Could Amadeus turn the situation around? This is impossible. Amadeus is absolutely no match for Nero. Master Delphi must have made a mistake. Barba was questioning in his heart. He kept denying his thoughts, but a trace of uneasiness surged in his heart. Nero took a deep breath. He suppressed the anger in his heart and strode toward Bronze Warriors' lane. No matter how unwilling he is, he had no choice but to compromise. The Master, the Knighthood of the Order, was a bone-forging expert, not someone he could afford to offend. He didn't even dare to show his anger in front of Master Delphi. Open your eyes wide and let me see clearly. I am the strongest. Felix roared in his heart. and then he entered the Bronze Warrior's lane. One bronze man after another broke through the wall with a bronze hammer in his hands. They rushed towards Nero and surrounded him. All of you, get the hell out of here. Along with Nero's furious roar, his terrifying sound waves swept him out and knocked the bronze man in front of him to the ground. It cracked. How could this be possible? Looking at the bronze man covered in fine cracks on the ground, and the countless disciples outside the Bronze Warrior's lane were stunned. Even the usually calm disciples couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. The bronze men inside the Bronze Warrior's lane were all forged from fully refined bronze before they were animated with spirits. Compared to intermediate spirit weapons, their solid metal bodies were not much different. In fact, they were even harder than intermediate spirit weapons. Even among the numerous disciples, there were very few who could break their copper bodies. Nero was very angry right now. He was fighting madly, and none of the bronze men were his match. In an instant, he had defeated more than half of the bronze men. All of you are trash. Nero laughed wildly. He continued to push forward. The Fifth Empyrean early stages that had caused most of the bronze men to despair faced with Nero. They were like a piece of paper that could be broken with a single stab. 520 meters. 550 meters. 580 meters. 600 meters. 620 meters. Very quickly, Neo broke the record of 656 meters by the Southern Pete's second expert, Catosalaxia. He had broken the record of 660 meters in Bronze Warrior's lane. At this moment, the strength of the bronze men was comparable to a 6th layer mid-strength gladiator. It was just a casual attack from them. It had ferocious strength. But Nero wasn't afraid at all. All the spiritual energies in his body were vibrating, and a strong wind was blowing in all directions. He waved both of his fists. He wanted to use his strength to fight these terrifying bronze men head-on. He's really terrifying, the crowd said. Is this three heroes' combat strength? He's just too strong. Outside the Bronze Warrior's lane, the servant disciples were looking at Nero, who was advancing like a centurion. Nero's strength had already far surpassed theirs. They were not on the same level at all. He's already gone 700 meters, but he still hasn't reached his limit. This is unbelievable. 700 meters away from Bronze Warrior's lane, the strength of each bronze statue was no weaker than a peak 6th layer gladiator. Each strike contained a fierce amount of strength, which was enough to make countless 5th Empyrean gladiators despair. By now, they could only slow down Nero's breakthrough competition. Episode 20. The Secret Technique, Spirit Burst. We are about to reach the final forbidden zone. But Nero still hasn't stopped. Where is his limit? At this moment, even Titus Julius and Tiberius Gabinus, who were in charge of the three heroes, couldn't help but have serious looks on their faces. The last 80 meters of Bronze Warrior's lane was known by the world as a forbidden zone. third major hurdle of Bronze Warriors Lane, and the difficulty had increased by a lot. The strength of the bronze men there was above the 7th layer gladiator of the 8th grade Bloodline, even if these bronze men had no intelligence at all. They were controlled by mechanisms, and they didn't have any combat training. However, their strength far exceeded that of a 7th layer warrior. In addition to their terrifying numbers, a rumbling broke out along the mountain range. 730 meters. He has broken the strongest record from last year. Last year, the number 1 person in the Bronze Warriors Lane had just stepped into the last forbidden zone. Before he could walk a few meters, he was smashed to the ground by the bronze men. Candida, 10 spirit stones and the blue cloud sword. Pay up. I'll take good care of them. Outside the Bronze Warriors Lane, Barbo's face was filled with pride once again. 730 meters in the Bronze Warriors Lane. In the past 10 years, there had only been a couple of people, handful even, whose achievements could compare with this record. Furthermore, this was not Felix's limit. There is still no winner yet. It's too early for you to say this, Candida retorted with a sneer. However, the sweat on his forehead believed the nervousness and uneasiness in his heart. It would be very difficult for Amadeus to surpass Felix. He had almost no hope of doing so. 740 meters. This should be his limit. Felix had used up too much of his physical strength and spiritual energies along the way. As expected, Nero seemed to have fallen into a quagmire. Every step he was to take was extremely difficult. He should be finished soon. Titus Julius and the other 2 men outside the Bronze Warriors Lane felt relieved. If Nero continued to walk forward, they really didn't have much confidence in their ability to compete with him. Right at that moment, something unexpected happened. The marrow cleansing pill must be mine. Break it for me, spirit exploding art. Rays of bright light burst out of Nero's body. His soul expanded in an instant, and the blessings of Mithraea in his body rose steadily. A violent wind swept out with Nero at its center. It swept across the Bronze Warriors Lane, causing the attacks of the bronze men in all 4 directions to stop immediately. Nero seemed to have grown a few inches taller. It was as if an ancient, ferocious beast had been revived in his body. I am the strongest. At this moment, Nero's voice changed. It became as loud as the bronze bell spread in all directions. This is the secret of the Felix family in Cappadocia, the spirit exploding art. Looking at Nero, who looked like Pluto had ascended to walk among men, Titus Julius's expression changed. Damn it. How could I have forgotten about this? The spirit exploding art was the arcane art of the Felix family in Cappadocia. Non-direct disciples were not allowed to practice it. Once it was used, The potential of the caster's body instantly skyrocketed, and his strength increased exponentially. The Felix family had been able to dominate Cappadocia because of the spirit exploding art. The technique did have its drawbacks, though. Within a month of the spirit exploding art had been cast, the caster would be in a weakened state. They would not be able to exert 50% of their full combat strength, or even less. However, compared to the generous potential rewards, this small drawback was nothing. As long as he won first place and obtained the marrow cleansing pill, Nero Felix was confident that he would be able to improve his bloodline to the 6th level and break through to the mid-rank 8 in one go. He would be able to completely surpass Titus Julius and Tiberius Gabinus and become a top genius in the knighthood of the order. Is the spirit exploding art the arcane art that can stimulate one's potential in a short period of time? Master Delphi, floating outside the Bronze Warrior's lane, glanced at Nero in surprise, but didn't say anything. Although it was forbidden to use pills and weapons in the War of Bronze Warrior's lane, it wasn't forbidden to use secret techniques. Nero's actions were not against the rules. All right. Barba was extremely pleased with himself. The trace of the melancholy in his heart disappeared without a trace. Aurelius, who was standing aside, felt like he had been struck by lightning. His heart had sunk to the bottom of the valley. Amadeus, who didn't have much chance of winning, had lost all hope. He regretted the bet deeply. I was too impulsive. I knew that Barba was up to no good. Why would I bet with him? Isn't it just the spirit accumulation pill? I still have other ways to obtain it. Within the Bronze Warrior's lane, Nero's aura had finally reached its peak. Break. With a loud shout, Nero's entire body was like the descent of Mars onto the battlefield. He struck out with all of his might, each punch carrying an unparalleled momentum. He smashed the bronze man that had suppressed him until he couldn't advance an inch into pieces, just like that. 740 meters. 745 meters. 750 meters. 755 meters. Titus Julius and Tiberius Gabinus' eyes were dim, and their faces were ashen. From now on, they will be under Nero. They still had the confidence to compete with him in Bronze Warrior's lane, but 755 meters was far beyond their limit. And Nero was still pushing forward. 760 meters. He's still pushing forward? Unbelievable! Looks like Nero will be the strongest person in this year's Bronze Warrior's lane. With such combat strength, I'm afraid that not many people in the knighthood of the order will be a match for him. Many servant disciples had unknowingly been conquered by that figure, which had been looked like a devil god. 768 meters was the Nero final result. The spirit exploding art did have a time limit after all. It was impossible to continuously increase a person's training. 1 minute was the limit of Nero's endurance. Once he surpassed it, it would shake his foundation. This was not something Nero wanted to see. And without the spirit exploding art, his strength would be affected. How could Nero be a match for those powerful spirit exploding arts? 768 meters. Good. Nero Felix really didn't let me down. Laughing wildly in his heart, Barbo immediately said to Candida, who was standing at his side, "Candida, looks like it won't be long before your blue cloud sword changes owner." Hearing this, a trace of resentment flashed across Aurelius's face. He wanted to refute what Barbo had said, but the last words he said turned into a helpless, cold snort. 768 meters. This result was too shocking. No one had achieved such a high result in hundreds of years. There were only a handful of people who could compete with him. No matter how strong Amadeus was, he would never be able to surpass Nero. Nero had already left the Bronze Warrior's lane. When he passed by Amadeus, he glanced at him with disdain, as if to say, "You are not worthy to be compared with me." However, what made Nero angry was that Amadeus didn't seem to be having any sort of provocativeness in his eyes. He didn't even look at him. It was as if Amadeus had completely ignored him. Nero glared at Amadeus fiercely. His good mood had been completely ruined. At that moment, Master Delphi moved and pointed at Tiberius Gabinus, who had an icy temperament, and said, "Next, you." What? It's not him? What's going on? Did we make a mistake? The last 5 people are not ranked by strength as we imagined? I'm afraid we really did make a mistake. Master Delphi must be randomly assigning these last few people. The Bronze Warrior's lane began to shake. That terrifying result of 768 meters was enough to make countless people despair. Even Titus Julius and Tiberius Gabinus would not be able to surpass it. The corner of Nero's mouth tilted, and a trace of pride appeared in his eyes. A mere piece of trash 9th class bloodline. How can he compare with us? Aren't we ranked based on our strength? A look of realization appeared on Tiberius's face, and the resentment he had for Amadeus disappeared without a trace. Nero looked down on Amadeus, the 9th class bloodline warrior, and Tiberius Gabinus did the same. In his heart, he knew that only the 3 heroes and Titus Julius were his match. He didn't even take Julia Albus seriously. The next moment, Tiberius Gabinus took a step forward and continued to walk into the Bronze Warrior's lane. Tiberius Gabinus was as cold as ice. He had cultivated a combat skill that had manipulated the power of the frost, otherwise known as ice arts. His fists and legs were covered with a terrifying cold energy, just like Heims, who controlled ice and snow. Those bronze men were frozen before they could even get close to him. Soon, he passed 720 meters in the Bronze Warrior's lane and entered the last forbidden zone. What can you do to me? Facing the servant disciples that can make countless bronze men despair, Tiberius Gabinus shows no sign of weaknesses. Streams of cold energy spread around his body, and he turned into Boreas from the land of the extreme cold. Within the havoc of the Bronze Warrior's lane, Tiberius Gabinus steadily pushed forward. 725 meters. 730 meters. 735 meters. 740 meters. 746 meters pass. Outside the Bronze Warrior's lane, a white-robed Master Delphi looked at Tiberius Gabinus, who was being supported by a disciple as he walked out of the Bronze Warrior's lane. The difference between 746 meters and 768 meters was very obvious. However, it did not mean that Tiberius Gabinus was worse than Nero. If he had mastered a forbidden art that was similar to the spirit exploding art, then it would have been hard to tell who had won.